In what percent of arrests do you think police use force? Or in what percentage of arrests do officers fire their weapons? If you watch or read primarily left-leaning media outlets, you would probably think the numbers are pretty high. And you'd be wrong. A new book reveals statistics that should not surprise anyone who actually covers police fairly. That in the vast majority of cases, police are just serving and protecting without incident. The new book, Criminal Injustice, written by Rafael Mangual, found, for example, that police use force in less than 1% of arrests. He also found that they fire weapons only 0.03% of the time in those arrests. So the horrible, always aggressive police are maybe not as reckless and threatening as many in the left-leaning media would have us believe. And yet, according to the most recent AP NORC poll, 48% of Americans find police violence to be extremely or very serious, while 34% say it's moderately serious. That's 4 in 5 people seriously concerned about a police violence problem that may be vastly overstated. The book also reveals many other details and analysis about the American police that often don't get reported. And the data also seems to indicate that reform proposals, from defunding police to abolishing qualified immunity, should, quote, not be expected to produce declines in police use of force. Qualified immunity is granted in less than 4% of civil rights cases filed against police, according to the book. More controversially, he seeks to debunk what he calls, quote, dominant narratives that black and brown men unduly suffer at the hands of police and a criminal justice system that is stacked against them. Joining us now is the author of Criminal Injustice and fellow at the Manhattan Institute, Rafael Mangual. Thanks very much for coming on the program. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, so what do you think is the biggest myth about police that you've been able to disprove in this book?
I think the biggest myth is that police violence is a common outcome of a police-citizen interaction, right? There's been this narrative formed around these really viral incidents of police uses of force, particularly controversial ones, that I think have kind of been sort of shoved into the mind of the American public and has formed the basis for this widespread belief that you just mentioned in the polling data, that police use violence all the time, that it happens in the majority of arrests. I often, poll the audience when I give public talks, and I'll ask them, how often do you think police use force when they're making an arrest? They'll say 15%, 25%, 55%. The reality is it's less than 1% of arrests.
Well, and even if you take, and you mentioned the race issue, which is a very sensitive one. If you look at the numbers even from the Washington Post tracker, and you ask people, what percentage of people who are killed by police do you think are unarmed black men? And I get numbers, I've asked this question to many people, and they'll say 20 to 40%. And the answer is 2%, according to the Washington Post tracker.
Right.
But when you say in this book that you think that maybe it's overstated, the concern about it, why do you say that?
Well, because I think the sort of rhetorical posture of our debate reflects a problem that is much bigger than the one that actually exists. And so, when you have polling data like the data that you just quoted, I think that tells us that the media has really failed at their sort of core job, which is to tell the truth and to give people a sense of what reality is. And the reality is not that police are perfect, but it's also not that police are these sort of malevolent, trigger-happy Neanderthals, which I think is the impression that a lot of people get.
But as you know, people take those same numbers from the Washington Post and other places, and they say, but wait a sec, disproportionately, the number of people who are unarmed, who are shot and killed, are people of color.
That's right. And they're making a disproportionality argument on the basis of the percentage of the general population that blacks and Hispanics in particular make up. That is, I think, the wrong unit of measurement here. What we want to control for are race-neutral factors that are going to affect the degree to which certain demographic groups interact with police, but also the degree to which certain demographic groups are going to be represented in police use of force statistics. Now, crime is not an evenly distributed problem in the United States. Here in New York City, about 3.5% of street segments see about 50% of all violent crime. This is a problem that is disproportionately concentrated in low-income, minority neighborhoods. That is the sad reality, right? The majority of shooting victims, in fact, a minimum of 95% of all shooting victims in New York City are either black or Hispanic. So if police officers respond to that problem where it is, you're already going to have a disproportionate amount of contacts with that demographic.
You may not know how to answer this question because there may not be any statistics on it. But one of the things where I have been sympathetic to people of color talking about disproportionate interactions with police has been on people being pulled over, for example, in wealthier neighborhoods, et cetera, and the way that police who are white react when a crime is committed in an area which is heavily black. It does seem to me that there is some data there which seems to show the possibility of a disproportionate response on the part of police.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure, that the data is all that convincing. Police officers are doing a hard job in a particular context that I think often just doesn't get accounted for.
I read about this in one of your colleagues' reports.
Yeah.
The one area, because again, your point is well taken about the 2% and about the race of the people involved who are victims, et cetera. But he was saying that the one area that there seems to potentially be some problems is when white police officer responds in tough situation in black neighborhood, that occasionally there appears to be disproportionate.
Right. There's a disproportionality that's not explained by any other obvious factor. Right now, the assumption,
it's not proven.
Right. So the assumption is, in the minds of a lot of police critics, is that, well, if nothing else that's obvious explains this, it must be explained by racial animus.
Right.
But that's not necessarily true. We don't really know what's going on. It is possible, for example, that the black suspects in those situations may be reacting differently toward white cops than they would toward black cops in a way that shows up in the data.
And bottom line, I completely agree with you 100% about the media's narrative that it is. The reason we had you on the show is because this supports something I've been saying for a long time, which is the false media narrative about policing in this country. People just don't seem to understand it. Thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you
so much. The book is called Criminal Injustice. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your cable provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.